Listen on Sounds.
Now, the BBC News at 6 o'clock with Sophie Raworth.
At 6, another Conservative MP defects to Labour. This is the moment Natalie Elphicke, the MP for Dover, crossed from the Tory benches to Labour moments before the Prime Minister stood up to speak. Also tonight, a pedestrian who shouted at a cyclist on the pavement, causing her to fall into the path of a car, has her manslaughter conviction overturned. We report on the healthcare agency charging NHS hospitals up to £2,000 a shift for specialist nurses. AstraZeneca's COVID vaccine, developed by Oxford scientists, is being withdrawn worldwide. And Prince Harry's at St Paul's during a flying visit to the UK. The King's just 2 miles away at Buckingham Palace, but it seems father and son won't meet.
On BBC London, upset, horrified and shaken. We hear from one London doctor who says he's received anti-Semitic abuse at work from other medics.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. Another Conservative MP has defected to Labour, the second in less than 2 weeks. Natalie Elphicke, the MP for Dover, said the Conservatives under Rishi Sunak have become a byword for incompetence and division. She made the move just minutes before the Prime Minister faced MPs in the Commons at Prime Minister's questions for the first time since suffering heavy defeats in local elections in England. Here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
Natalie Elphicke shoulder to shoulder with the Prime Minister when Rishi Sunak invited reporters to Dover last summer to talk about stopping the boats. Less than a year later, she has stopped being a Conservative MP.
Come in. You're very welcome.
Look at the leader she's appearing with now. I must admit, when I got up this morning, I didn't expect to hear this today.
Natalie Elphicke, the Labour Member of Parliament for Dover and Deal.
I think she speaks for very many Tory voters in saying that the Tory party has changed. It's left the centre ground. But equally, the Labour Party has changed, and we are very clearly the party of the national interest, of country first, party second. Really good day.
That's been a great day.
Cue the mildly awkward first date with the cameras in tow vibes ahead of her criticism of the Prime Minister.
He's not stopping the boats and he's letting the country down. Well, meanwhile, under Labour, they are clear that it is important to have defence and they want to make sure that they have good national security. So I think we should have confidence that Labour are the party who will tackle this issue of the small boats crossings.
And this is what crossing the floor, as it's known, looks like. Natalie Elphicke being led to the Labour benches. She takes a seat behind Keir Starmer and gets another handshake from the new boss. Little wonder the Labour leader appeared to be enjoying himself.
He's also lost 1,500 Tory councillors, half of his party's mayors, and a leadership election to a lettuce. How many more times do the public and his own MPs need to reject him before he takes the hint?
This time last year, I reminded him of some advice, actually, from his own mentor, Tony Blair, who had said at the time that he can be as cocky as he likes about local elections, but come a general election, it's policy that counts, Mr. Speaker.
I'm really in a rush to get to this meeting, I'm afraid.
You can't spare us a sentence? That meeting was Rishi Sunak talking to his MPs about those terrible local election results last week.
Afternoon. Any words for Natalie Elphicke?
It's a shame. With Natalie being further to the right of me, I'll be surprised if she finds a home with the Labour Party.
If you look at the things she said in the past, her criticisms of Labour on immigration policy on the boats, seems completely incompatible with her position now.
It's up to her.
Any words to offer her?
I only go through Dover for the ferry.
How are you feeling? What are you going to ask?
Natalie Elphicke became an MP in 2019, replacing her then husband Charlie Elphicke after he was charged with sexually assaulting 2 women. He was later convicted and jailed, at which point she announced that their marriage was ending. Tonight, Labour will hope the focus is on the big picture. 2 defections from the Conservatives in less than a fortnight. Natalie Elphicke today, after this man, Dan Poulter, a week last Sunday. And yes, you'd be forgiven for thinking that folk here swap parties all the time after the last couple of weeks. Actually, if you go back a couple of years, there was a chap called Christian Wakeford who swapped from the Conservatives to Labour. Before that, you have to go back 27 years to find an MP who left the governing party and went to the main party of opposition. And you know, defections always mesmerise a deeply tribal Westminster. But the curiosity with this one is that it's almost equal opportunities in its discombobulation for Conservative MPs and Labour MPs. So Conservative MPs, as you saw there, delighting in the fact, as they see it, that Natalie Elphicke is to the right of them, even though she's now a Labour MP. Actually, you can argue that her politics is a bit more nuanced than that. But also an additional detail, remarks that she made in an interview after the conviction of her ex-husband, in which she said that him being attractive and attracted to women had made him an easy target. She has not commented on those remarks today. Labour has said all of those issues were dealt with previously.
Chris Mason, thank you. More global temperature records have been broken. April was the warmest on record, according to the EU climate service Copernicus. And BBC analysis has found that over the past year, the world's oceans have broken temperature records too because of climate change. It's had a major impact on marine life around the world. Our climate editor, Justin Rolat, reports.
The Menai Bridge between North Wales and the island of Anglesey. Scientists have been monitoring the plants and animals on the seashore here for almost 70 years.
It's invaluable and it tells us so much about where species were, how quickly they've moved.
They've been going back to the same places all around the UK, creating a unique record of the changing populations on our country's rocky coasts. In that time, sea temperatures around this country have warmed by an average of about 1 degree Celsius.
The big thing that I've seen is species aren't all moving at the same rate. So things are moving further north, but not at the same speed. So all the community compositions are changing everywhere because different species are moving at different rates.
Some creatures can't move at all, like barnacles. So Nova, this is a really disruptive process for ecosystems.
I think if I was a barnacle, I'd be quite worried, yes.
If one species vanishes or a new one comes in, it can affect all the other plants and animals in the system. At Aberystwyth University, scientists track the changes with the same technology the police use at crime scenes.
I think we're going to put this down about 5 metres.
The researchers collect the traces of DNA animals leave in the water. It is known as eDNA, environmental DNA.
It's possible to use eDNA to track the movement of invasive species. There is a Japanese species of sea squirt. It's called a carpet sea squirt. They form a blanket, a carpet if you like, over the seabed. They prevent the growth of native organisms in the areas that they colonise. Because they do so well in our environment, they can potentially take over huge areas of the seabed. What we are finding is that the ones that are more invasive appear to be responding more strongly to global warming and increasing water temperatures.
It is evidence of just how fragile some of our marine ecosystems are, and stands as a warning that, as our seas continue to warm, we can expect unpredictable changes in the marine life of the UK. Justin Rolat, BBC News, Aberystwyth.
Prince Harry has attended a Thanksgiving service at St Paul's Cathedral in London this afternoon to celebrate the 10th anniversary of his Invictus Games. Just 2 miles away, the King and Queen were hosting the first of this year's garden parties at Buckingham Palace. Our royal correspondent Sarah Campbell joins us from St Paul's this evening, but it does seem that there's going to be no reunion between father and son.
Yeah, that's right. The service is now over, as you can tell by the sound of the bells. Prince Harry is still inside. You can probably see the crowd there, hoping for a glimpse of him on the way out. He arrived just a few minutes before the service started at 5 o'clock, and he was cheered by a crowd which had sort of gradually built up throughout the afternoon. Welcomed at the top of the steps by the Dean of St Paul's, and inside was a congregation who have come to know each other through the Invictus Games, which was of course founded by Prince Harry, who wanted to do something to help servicemen and women overcome their mental and physical traumas. Inside to support him were members of his mother's family, so his aunt, Lady Jane Fellows, and his uncle, Earl Spencer. And during the service, Prince Harry gave a reading. The sermon was all about the power of rebuilding, and also prayers were said for the next Invictus, which is in Canada next year. Now, at the first Games back in 2014, Harry was flanked by both the King and Prince William, but that wasn't the case here today. In fact, if you went across town to Buckingham Palace, the King was hosting the first garden party of the season, was there with other senior members of the royal family. Harry's spokesperson had made it known in advance that the King's full programme would mean that the two would not be meeting. There's been no comment from Buckingham Palace. I should say the next stop for Prince Harry is Nigeria. This is one of the latest nations to join Invictus, and he will go from here to there, along with his wife, Meghan.
Sarah Campbell, thank you. A woman who shouted at a cyclist on the pavement, causing her to fall into the path of an oncoming car, has had her manslaughter conviction overturned. 77-year-old Celia Ward died in 2020. Oriel Gray, who's 50, was jailed for 3 years last year. But the Court of Appeal has ruled that her conviction was unsafe. John Donnison reports.
CCTV shows Oriel Gray walking alongside a busy road in Huntingdon. As Celia Ward approached by bike, Ms Gray swore at her and shouted at her to get off the pavement. It caused the 77-year-old retired midwife to fall into the road, where she was hit by a car. Ms Gray, who is partially blind and has cerebral palsy, was charged with unlawful act manslaughter. She was found guilty last March and jailed for 3 years. But she arrived at the High Court today to hear that conviction had been quashed. The court heard that in order to be convicted of unlawful act manslaughter, an unlawful act needed to have taken place. But the 3 appeal court judges said that if Celia Ward had not have died, it was inconceivable that Oriel Gray would have been convicted of assault. They therefore said they had no hesitation in ruling that the conviction was unsafe. In a statement, Oriel Gray's family said, "Whilst we welcome the decision of the Court of Appeal, our thoughts today are also with the Ward family. And I'm sure a day doesn't go by when they don't remember their tragic loss." In a case where one woman lost her life and another wrongly spent a year in jail, there were no winners. John Donnison, BBC News at the High Court.
AstraZeneca's COVID vaccine that was developed by scientists in Oxford is being withdrawn globally. It was one of the first to be produced during the pandemic. Billions of doses were created. The company says the withdrawal decision is for commercial reasons. So what has changed? Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson is here.
Thank you. Well, the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine was one of the very first to be rolled out in January 2021. It had been developed at Oxford University in record time, 10 months, instead of the usual 10 years. The then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, described it as a triumph for British science. It was cheaper and easier to store than other jabs. Globally, more than 3 billion doses were supplied, with nearly 50 million jabs given in the UK. And the vaccine is estimated to have saved millions of lives. But in a tiny number of cases, it causes life-threatening blood clots. It's been linked to 81 deaths in the UK. The government's made vaccine damage payments to families, and there are a number of ongoing court cases with people claiming to have been harmed by the vaccine. Most countries have now stopped using it and have switched to other vaccines. Today, AstraZeneca said there was no longer a demand for their jab and that other vaccines which target the new variants of COVID have superseded it. It said withdrawing the jab from the market was a commercial decision.
Sophie Hutchinson there. Now, the time is 6:15. Our top story this evening. A second Conservative MP defects to Labour within 2 weeks. Natalie Elphicke, the MP for Dover, crossed to the Labour benches moments before Prime Minister's questions. And still to come, we meet the 97-year-old woman finally recognised for her service during World War II.
At 6:30, how some children with severe food allergies are overcoming them by eating the very products that are harmful. Plus, staying on our skyline as the London Eye is officially confirmed as a permanent fixture.
A group of parents who say social media played a part in their children's deaths have criticised new online safety rules drawn up by the media regulator Ofcom. The parents of 12-year-old Archie Battersby, 15-year-old Breck Bednar, 16-year-old Brianna Jai and 14-year-old Molly Russell are among those who took part in a BBC Breakfast debate this morning. Social media companies face being named and shamed if they don't toughen up their age checks and do more to stop young people from seeing the most harmful content. But many of the parents say Ofcom's new draft code lacks ambition. Angus Crawford reports.
11 young faces, 11 short lives. The online world playing a role in each of their deaths. Leaving behind them parents campaigning in their names so no other family has to go through what they have. And they have a simple message.
Sit up and listen to parents that have lost their children. It is a David and Goliath situation. The speed's been quite painful and very frustrating as a parent.
Everyone here knows only too well how damaging the products of big tech can be. Today, their chance to question the minister and the regulator and demand that they do more to rein in Silicon Valley.
Parents and young people and everyone here today is kind of counting on us.
First, the chief executive of Ofcom.
How are you going to impose and verify their age? Pretty much all the social media platforms have a minimum age of 13, but they're not doing enough they're not doing anything really at the moment to enforce that. We know that, I'm afraid, 40% of 5 to 7-year-olds currently are on social media. And I would say to any parents listening today, it is a very risky environment for children of primary school age.
13 is still a child, 14 is still a child, 15 is still a child. Yet many tech companies assume that if you're 15, that's okay.
Well, it clearly isn't okay for 13 to 17-year-olds to be on social media today, given that it's not a safe environment for them.
Then the turn of the minister, a question about suicide content on social media.
Why aren't they allowed to publish this content?
That's a really simple and really powerful question.
So under the Act, they're not. My message here, sitting on your sofa today, is that the tech companies don't need to wait for the full implementation of this bill. They can start now, and some of them already have, but they need to go further and faster to make the changes.
They are waiting. We know they're waiting. How can we make them move?
Yeah, so I feel your frustration on this, and if we could fully implement the bill tomorrow, I'd be doing it. I absolutely would. What we don't want to do is do so fast that it has lots of loopholes or that they can easily litigate and it's chewed up in the courts for years. We want this to be robust.
So I would like to see a phone which, at point of purchase, is set up and it's safe by design for children.
What we've done is really big. It is groundbreaking. It's more than any other country in the world has done in this space. Is it job done? Absolutely not.
So many really brave parents that have gone through so much horrendous, so many horrendous tragedies, and I think that they would be proud of the strength and the solidarity as well.
I suspect if they were still alive and seeing what we're doing, they'd be really proud and they'd be cheering us on.
11 young voices may be stilled, but in the fight to protect other children, their parents will not be silenced. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
Well, our social media correspondent Mariana Spring is with me now, and she has been looking at how these new rules will work. Mariana.
Thank you. Is it possible to stop kids and teenagers being recommended harmful content on social media? Ofcom wants to do just that by forcing social media companies to comply with stricter rules, and if they don't, say they could face a ban for under 18s. The first step is dealing with age verification. When you sign up for a social media profile, you're usually asked to give your birthday, but without showing ID. Various proposals have included using selfies to identify your age, or a passport or driving licence. But that can pose problems depending on where you live in the world, and can kids just get round it? Then there's the problem of taming social media sites' algorithms. Algorithms are the recommendation systems that promote content to us based on what they think we might like. There's evidence children have been actively pushed harmful content or become embroiled in social media frenzies. Social media insiders I've spoken to say it's very tricky to ensure one account isn't pushed a certain type of content when others can still be recommended it. Algorithms are key to the social media companies' business models. More eyeballs on more content means they make more money from ads. The social media companies all say, though, that they prioritise safety over profit. Regardless, they're incredibly powerful. Part of the problem is that the whole world uses these apps. They aren't just limited to one place. Plus, political and legal measures to change the way they operate can take ages. By the time they're in place, the social media world has usually evolved again.
Mariana, thank you. Now, a healthcare agency is routinely charging NHS hospitals up to £2,000 a shift for specialist nurses supplied at short notice, with a substantial amount of the fee being kept by the agency itself. Independent Clinical Services, which trades as Thornbury Nursing Services, had a turnover of almost £400 million in its latest accounts. That's up almost 46% in 1 year, much more than similar firms. The company has told the BBC that it offers a valuable and flexible service that helps healthcare providers, and Thornbury accounts for less than half of its business. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, has more.
There you go, and that is okay.
The vital role of caring for sick children, here by skilled and experienced NHS nurses.
And then we're going to do this, okay?
But in some areas they're in short supply. Hospitals need to turn to staffing agencies to fill gaps and ensure safe staffing levels.
Okay.
This West Midlands hospital boss says agency bills are getting out of hand. There's an agreed deal capping costs for all freelance nurses, but agencies are allowed to charge more for last-minute requests, which are often unavoidable. He's most critical of this one, Thornbury, which has promotional videos featuring nurses.
Thornbury allowed me to drop my hours to part-time.
I can pick shifts whenever I want to.
And I wanted something that I've got control when I can work and I can spend some time with family.
I'm sure they would say they're an agency of last resort and they're providing a service, but if that's created a bigger problem by pulling nurses away from the NHS, then that's certainly profiteering. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if they were able to operate at the framework rates that the NHS has set, which is a reasonable rate for agency work.
They might argue that it's a free market and nobody has to use them and they're providing a service.
That's fine. I think the response to that is that because of that extreme cost, we ought to be finding better solutions to spend public money on.
One former agency nurse who wants to remain anonymous remembers her shifts working for Thornbury.
I've taken a call at 5:30 in the morning to travel a couple of hours to a trust to arrive just after their start time. From other people that I've worked with within Thornbury, I've had nurses that have been travelling down from the Midlands down to trusts that are below the London area.
So what are the costs and charges? Well, for a specialist paediatric nurse on a 12-hour Friday shift, our calculations show that Thornbury pays the nurse £539, but the hospital trust is charged almost £1,000. That's £400 difference per shift. And for a bank holiday shift, the nurse is paid £1,050, but the trust is charged around £1,840. That's a difference of around £800. Thornbury's parent company told us we offer a valuable and flexible service that helps healthcare providers. The level of rates necessarily reflect the last-minute and urgent nature of requests and the requirement for highly skilled workers. The NHS needs to hold on to nurses like these. The challenge, how to keep them on their books when agencies offer flexible hours and other benefits.
Any problems, give us a ring. Okay.
The Department of Health said there were plans to end the use of the most expensive agencies and staff training would be expanded. But while patients like little Lenny are happy with their treatment, hospital bosses are worried about finding the right staff to provide it. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
The Home Secretary says a Russian spy is going to be expelled from the UK and several Russian diplomatic premises are to be closed as part of a crackdown on Russian intelligence gathering operations here. Our security correspondent Gordon Carrera is with me. What's it all about?
Well, I'm told this wasn't due to a single incident, but rather the accumulation of what is being called malign activity. So in the UK, that includes cyber hacking, including against the political process, but also some recent arrests linked to national security. That includes allegations recently about an arson attack on a business linked to Ukraine in London. Those allegations have yet to come to court, but that was allegedly linked to Russia. Also in Europe, allegations of plans for sabotage in Poland and Germany, again linked to Ukraine, even the jamming of GPS signals linked to civil aviation. So all of that, but what's the response from the UK? Well, one thing they're doing is expelling the Russian defence attaché. They're describing him as an undeclared Russian spy. Most people that have known he's a military intelligence officer, though, but also closing 2 premises, one a trade and defence section in Highgate, North London, but also Seacock's House, which we can see here, a rather grand-looking building in Sussex, that allegedly used for intelligence purposes. Russia, of course, unhappy about this, says there'll be an appropriate response. You can expect similar expulsions and closures of British interests in Moscow soon, I'd have thought.
Gordon, thank you. John Swinney has been formally sworn in as Scotland's First Minister. Kate Forbes, the former Finance Secretary, has been appointed as his deputy after deciding not to run for the leadership of the SNP herself. Here's our Scotland editor, James Cook.
When this court first convened, James V was Scotland's king, Henry VIII governed England. By those standards, this ceremony is brand new.
John Ramsay Swinney to be First Minister of the Scottish Government.
Mr Swinney becomes just the 7th First Minister since devolution in 1999.
You swear that you will well and truly serve His Majesty King Charles in the office of First Minister of the Scottish Government.
3 times he nodded as Scotland's senior judge administered the oaths of office. And then, with his family looking on, he put pen to parchment, making it all official.
Please be seated.
It is the privilege of my life, and I look forward to dedicating my future to serving the people of Scotland as I have done so for so many years, and to do that as First Minister.
What are your priorities for government?
My overriding priority will be to work to eradicate child poverty in Scotland.
The formalities over, the focus has now shifted here to Bute House, the official residence of the First Minister, where John Swinney is appointing his cabinet. The big change, last year's SNP leadership contender Kate Forbes is back in government.
It's an enormous privilege, and I look forward to supporting the First Minister as he pursues the priorities of the Scottish people, eradicating poverty, ensuring economic growth and ultimately uniting the country behind the great opportunities of our day.
It all brings back memories for this man, Labour's Jack McConnell, now in the House of Lords. So what advice does the 3rd First Minister have for the 7th?
I think we need to give him the benefit of a fresh start. And I think people should be willing to work with him, but he needs to give a clear indication that he is willing to not just talk about working with other people, but to be open to new ideas, open to cross-party work, open to cross-government work with other parts of the UK.
Well, First Minister and Prime Minister did speak by phone this afternoon, with both promising to be constructive. James Cook, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Now, a 97-year-old woman from Lincolnshire has finally been recognised for the role that she played during World War II in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force after nearly 80 years. Evelyn Hillier was 17 years old when she volunteered in 1944 for the WAF, but she always thought she hadn't served for long enough to get her medal. Her family decided to investigate whether she was entitled to one, and after contacting the Ministry of Defence, they discovered that she was indeed qualified for the 1939 to 1945 War Medal. And so 79 years later, Evelyn has received her award from a senior Air Force officer at her care home in Stamford.
When I got demobbed, I didn't think I'd been in long enough to get a medal, so I never applied for it. Well, it's a bit late. It's important to have her because people then know that I was in the Air Force.
Evelyn Hillier there. Now, time for a look at the weather. Sarah Keith Lucas is here. What a lovely day.
Gorgeous,
Finally.
isn't it? Finally, I know we've been waiting for it long enough, haven't we, Sophie? Yes, some warm, settled weather for most of us out there today. This was the picture in Whitstable in Kent. So, yes, we've had a lot of blue sky and sunshine, but there's been a little bit of cloud drifting around too. And there's more of the same over the next few days, really. High pressure keeping our weather settled at the moment. So some spells of warm sunshine, not completely dry, bit of rain around across the north of Scotland, but for most of us, much drier than it has been. And we'll also see some mist and some fog patches here and there too. So through the rest of this evening, we have got a bit of rain across Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. That rain pushes its way northeastwards through the course of tonight, so fizzling out a little bit, but it's still quite damp in the far northwest. Further south, it's going to be mild and dry, and we are likely to see some mist and some fog patches. But it's this area of high pressure keeping things dry and settled at the moment. Weather fronts just to the north of that, that's bringing a little bit more cloud, some slightly cooler air and outbreaks of rain across the north of Scotland. But further south, then, we are likely to see those mist and fog patches. So I think quite a murky start to your Thursday morning in places, particularly I think close to these Irish Sea coast. We're likely to see some lingering fog patches. There's the patchy rain that'll be sitting across the northwest of Scotland, drier in the east from the word go. And that rain will start to ease away towards the north, so most of us looking dry through the day. There'll be a little bit more cloud bubbling up once that mist and fog clears away.